The wind whispered across the vast prairie, bending the tall golden grass like waves in a silent ocean. The sky stretched endlessly above, painted in shades of amber and fading blue as the sun sank behind distant mountains. He had not meant to come this way. The mountain man rode slowly, his horse's hooves muffled by the soft earth. His broad shoulders were dusted with the weariness of long travel, his face hardened by years of solitude. He was a man who belonged to no town, no name spoken twice in the same place. But something had pulled him here. Then he saw her. At first, she looked like nothing more than a shadow among the grass, a shape too still, too fragile. His grip tightened on the reins. He dismounted before he even realized he had made the decision. Each step toward her felt heavier than the last. She was lying on her side, her dress torn, dust clinging to her skin, strands of her hair tangled and matted. There were bruises, faint but unmistakable. Not fresh enough to speak of the moment, but not old enough to forget. She was alive, barely. He dropped to his knees beside her. For a moment he didn't speak, didn't move, just looked. Something inside him shifted. A part of him he had buried long ago stirred like a wound reopening. Her breathing was shallow, uneven. Slowly, carefully, he reached out, his rough hand trembling in a way it hadn't in years, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered, faint, distant, but there. And then, in a voice low and steady, yet carrying something deeper, something dangerous, he asked, "Who did this to you?" The words weren't loud, but they carried weight, a promise hidden inside a question. Her lips parted slightly. No sound came at first, only a trembling breath, and then barely more than a whisper. They said, "No one would come." Her eyes rolled shut again, and in that moment, something inside the mountain man broke, not loudly, not violently, but completely. He closed his eyes for a second, jaw tightening. When he opened them again, he was no longer just a man passing through. He lifted her gently into his arms, as though she might shatter if he held her wrong. "You're wrong," he murmured quietly. Someone came. The journey back to his cabin was long. The mountains loomed closer with every mile, dark silhouettes against the fading light. The air grew colder, sharper, biting against the skin, but he didn't stop, not once. She drifted in and out of consciousness in his arms as he rode. Sometimes she stirred, her body tensing as if caught in a memory she could not escape. Once, she whispered something, a name. He didn't catch it, but the fear in her voice stayed with him. By the time they reached the cabin, night had fallen completely. The world had gone quiet, too quiet. He pushed open the wooden door with his shoulder, stepping into the dim interior. The familiar scent of pine wood and firewood wrapped around him, grounding him for a brief moment. He laid her carefully on the bed. For a second, he just stood there, looking at her. This was not part of his life. He had chosen solitude, chosen silence, chosen to leave behind anything that could be taken from him again. And yet, here she was, and he already knew. There was no turning away. The fire crackled softly as the hours passed. He worked in silence, cleaning her wounds as best as he could. His hands, though rough and calloused, moved with surprising care. Every mark told a story, and none of them were kind. He didn't ask questions anymore, not yet, but the promise he hadn't spoken out loud, it had already taken root. She woke just before dawn. The first light of morning slipped through the window, casting soft gold across the room. Her eyes opened slowly, confusion flickering through them, then fear. She tried to sit up too quickly, a sharp breath escaping her as pain pulled her back down. "You're safe." His voice stopped her. She turned her head. He stood near the door, arms crossed, watching, but not threatening, not imposing, just present. Her breathing was uneven. Her eyes searched his face. "You brought me here?" she asked softly. He nodded once. Silence lingered between them, fragile, uncertain. "Why?" she whispered. It was a simple question, but one he hadn't been asked in a long time. He thought about it for a moment, then answered honestly. "Because no one else did." Her gaze softened, just slightly, but the fear didn't leave, not yet. Days passed slowly. She spoke little, and he didn't push. Trust, he knew, wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned, piece by piece. He learned the way she flinched at sudden movement, the way her eyes drifted to the door, as if expecting it to burst open at any moment, the way she held herself, like someone waiting for something bad to happen. Always. But he also noticed something else: strength, quiet, unyielding. She didn't break, even when she could have. One evening, as the sky burned orange beyond the mountains, she finally spoke more than a few words. "They won't stop," she said. He looked up from where he sat, sharpening a knife. "Who?" Her hands tightened slightly in her lap. "The men." The word felt heavy. "They said I belonged to them." Silence filled the room. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. "And do you?" he asked calmly. Her eyes snapped to his. There was something fierce in them now, something alive. "No!" He nodded once. That was enough. That night, he didn't sleep. He stood outside the cabin, watching the darkness stretch across the land, listening, waiting, because now he knew. This wasn't over, not even close. And deep in his chest, that quiet promise began to take shape into something stronger, something unbreakable. If they came, they wouldn't find the same man they had hurt before, and they would never touch her again, and far beyond the mountains, unseen, unheard. Riders moved through the night, following a trail that had not yet gone cold. The mornings in the mountains came quietly. Mist rolled between the trees like a living thing, soft and slow, wrapping the cabin in a fragile stillness. The world felt distant there, almost untouched, but peace, he knew, was often just an illusion. She was standing by the window when he noticed her that morning. The light touched her face gently, revealing more than it hid now. The bruises had begun to fade, but the shadows in her eyes remained. She didn't hear him approach. "You should be resting." She flinched, not as sharply as before, but enough. He stopped a few steps behind her, giving space. "I'm tired of lying down," she said quietly. Her voice was steadier now, stronger. He nodded once, even though she couldn't see it. "That's a good sign." A faint pause. Then, after a moment, "My name is Eliza." The words lingered in the air like something fragile being offered. He hadn't asked, but she gave it anyway. He respected that. "Elias," he replied. She turned slightly, studying him, as if trying to understand the man who had stepped into her life without warning and refused to leave. Days turned into a rhythm, simple, quiet, but meaningful in ways neither of them spoke out loud. He taught her how to tend the fire, how to move carefully across uneven ground without losing balance, how to listen to the forest, not just hear it. And she brought something back into that cabin that had been missing for a long time. Warmth, not from the fire, but something deeper. One afternoon, they walked beyond the edge of the clearing. The mountains rose tall around them, their peaks dusted with the last traces of snow. A stream cut through the land nearby, its water clear and cold. Eliza paused by the water's edge. Her reflection stared back at her. For a long moment, she didn't recognize it. "I used to like looking at myself," she said softly. Elias said nothing. "I used to think," she hesitated, her voice faltering just slightly, "that I knew who I was." The wind brushed through the trees. "But they took that too," she whispered. That he understood. more than he wanted to. "You can take it back," he said. She let out a quiet, almost broken laugh. "Can you?" He stepped closer now, not too close, but enough. "I did." She looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time, she saw it. The past he didn't speak about, the pain he carried without complaint. "What happened to you?" she asked. The question hung between them, heavy, real. For a moment it seemed like he wouldn't answer. Then he exhaled slowly. "There was a town," he began, his voice low, distant, as if the memory lived far away but never truly left. "I had a wife." Eliza's breath caught slightly. "And a son." Silence. Even the forest seemed to quiet around them. "They were everything," he continued. "I built a life. Thought it would last." His jaw tightened slightly. "But men like the ones who hurt you, they don't just take what they want." He looked out toward the mountains, eyes darkening. "They take everything." Eliza's eyes softened, pain meeting pain. "What happened?" she asked gently. He didn't look at her when he answered. "I buried them." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that echoed through the air. "I wasn't there," he added. "That's the worst part." A pause. "I should have been." Eliza swallowed hard. "No," she said quietly. He frowned slightly, turning toward her. "You couldn't have known." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes flickered. "I should have known," he repeated. That guilt. It hadn't faded, not even after all this time. That night, the silence between them felt different, not empty, but shared. Two broken stories, finally spoken aloud. Later, as the fire dimmed and the world outside grew dark, Eliza woke suddenly, her breath sharp, her body tense, a nightmare, again. She sat up, panic rising in her chest. The room felt too small, too closed, too much like, "No!" She swung her legs off the bed, trying to steady herself, but the fear didn't fade. It never faded quickly. The door creaked softly. Elias stood there, alerted by the sound. He didn't rush toward her, didn't overwhelm her, just stood. "I'm here," he said quietly. Her breathing was uneven. "They were here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I saw them. You're safe." He stepped closer now, slow, careful. "They're not here." Her eyes searched the room again, then returned to him, and something shifted, just slightly. "Stay," she said, barely above a whisper. It wasn't a command. It wasn't even a request. It was something deeper, something vulnerable. He didn't hesitate. He moved to the chair near the bed and sat down. "I'm not going anywhere." And for the first time since he found her, she believed it. Days later, the first sign came, subtle but unmistakable. Elias crouched near the edge of the trail, fingers brushing lightly over the dirt. Tracks, fresh, not his, not hers. His jaw tightened. They had found the trail. Back at the cabin, Eliza noticed the change immediately. "What is it?" He didn't answer right away, didn't want to bring fear back into her eyes, but he wouldn't lie. "They're close." The color drained slightly from her face. "I told you," she whispered. "I know." His voice was calm, too calm. "They'll take me back," she said, her breath quickening. "No." The word was firm, unshakable. "You don't understand." "I do." He stepped closer now, his presence steady, grounding. "They won't touch you." Her eyes filled with fear, and something else. Hope, dangerous hope. "You can't promise that," she said. He held her gaze, and this time there was no hesitation. "I already did." That night, the air felt heavier. The wind carried something colder, something closer. Elias loaded his rifle quietly, his movements precise. Eliza watched from inside, her heart pounding with something she couldn't fully name. Fear? Yes, but also something stronger. Trust, because somehow she knew if the world came crashing down around them, he would stand between her and it, no matter the cost. And in the distance, 3 riders stopped at the edge of the forest. One of them dismounted, crouching to inspect the ground. A slow smile spread across his face. "She's close." He stood, glancing toward the mountains. "Real close." The night didn't feel like the others. The wind had changed. It no longer whispered, it warned. Elias stood just beyond the cabin, his figure still against the dark outline of the mountains. The rifle rested easily in his hands, but there was nothing relaxed about him. He was listening. Every sound, every shift in the trees, every breath the forest took. Behind him, inside the cabin, a faint light flickered through the window. Eliza hadn't slept. Not really. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the door as if it might shatter at any moment. Her heart wouldn't slow down. It remembered too well. The sounds, the voices, the feeling of being hunted, not helped. She stood suddenly and moved toward the door before she could stop herself. When she opened it, the cold air rushed in. Elias turned instantly. "You should be inside." "I can't breathe in there," she said, her voice tight. He studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Stay close." She stepped beside him, wrapping her arms around herself as the wind brushed past. For a while, neither of them spoke, but the silence wasn't empty. It was filled with everything they didn't say. "You're not afraid?" she said after a while. It wasn't a question. Elias let out a slow breath. "I am." She looked at him, surprised. "You don't seem like it." "That's because fear doesn't change what needs to be done." His voice was steady, grounded, real. She swallowed, her gaze drifting toward the dark forest beyond. "They'll kill you," she whispered. He didn't answer immediately. Then, "Not tonight." There was no arrogance in his voice, only certainty. A branch snapped, far off, but not far enough. Elias's entire body stilled. Eliza felt it too, that shift in the air, that moment when the world holds its breath. "They're here," she whispered. Elias stepped slightly in front of her. Inside, now. This time she didn't argue. The cabin door shut softly behind them, but the silence outside. It was louder now. Minutes passed, or maybe seconds. Time didn't move the same way anymore. Then, a voice, smooth, cold, too familiar. "Well now, ain't this something?" Eliza's blood ran cold. "No," she breathed. Elias didn't look at her. "Stay behind me." Another voice followed, rougher, amused. "Told you she wouldn't get far." Boots creaked against wood outside. Slow, confident, like men who had never been told no. The door didn't burst open. It didn't need to. A knock came instead, mocking, patient. Elias's grip tightened on the rifle. "Eliza," the first voice called, almost gently. "You really thought you could just disappear?" Her hands trembled, but she didn't step back, not this time. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice shaking, but audible. A pause, then a low chuckle. "That wasn't a question." Elias stepped forward, positioning himself fully between her and the door. "You've said enough," he called out. Silence, then, "And who might you be?" Elias's voice didn't waver. "The man telling you to leave." Another pause, longer this time, then laughter, real laughter, the kind that came from men who had never feared consequences. "Or what?" the voice asked. Elias's eyes hardened. "Or you won't walk away." The tension snapped. Gunfire exploded through the night. The window shattered as a bullet tore through the glass. Eliza gasped, ducking instinctively. Elias fired back instantly, precise, controlled, not reckless. Outside, one of the men cursed, stumbling back. "Careful," another muttered. "This one bites." The air filled with smoke and splintered wood. each second stretched tight with danger. Elias moved with quiet efficiency, pulling Eliza down behind the thick wooden table. "Stay here," he said. "I'm not leaving you." "You're not," he interrupted firmly. "You're staying alive." Their eyes met, and in that moment, everything unspoken passed between them. Fear, trust, something deeper, something neither of them had planned. Outside, footsteps shifted. They were circling, waiting, hunting, but they didn't understand something. Elias wasn't prey. He never had been. Another shot rang out. Closer. Too close. The door splintered slightly from the impact. "They'll break in," Eliza whispered. Elias reloaded calmly. "Let them try." A sudden crash. The door burst inward. One of the men stepped inside, gun raised, but he wasn't fast enough. Elias fired once. The man dropped instantly. Silence followed, heavy, shocked. Even the others hadn't expected that. Outside, the leader's voice returned, but it had changed now, less amused, more dangerous. "You just made this a whole lot worse." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. Eliza's breathing was uneven. Her hands shook, but she wasn't frozen anymore. She looked at the fallen man, then at Elias. "You didn't hesitate," she said softly. His gaze remained fixed on the door. "They didn't hesitate with you." The words settled deep. Another long pause. Then, "We can do this the easy way," the leader called. "Or we can burn that cabin to the ground." Eliza's heart stopped. Fire. She knew what that meant, knew what it could take. Everything. Elias finally spoke again, low, controlled. "You try it." A pause. "And you won't live long enough to regret it." The wind howled suddenly, sweeping across the mountains. The firelight flickered, shadows danced along the walls, and in that moment, it became clear. This wasn't just a fight. This was a line being drawn, a promise, being defended. Eliza moved slightly closer to him, not hiding, not breaking, standing, with him. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. Elias glanced at her briefly, and for the first time since the night began, something softer touched his expression. "Good," he said quietly, "because neither am I." Outside, the leader smiled in the darkness. "Then let's finish this." The wind howled like a warning that had come too late. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with smoke, tension, and something deeper, something unspoken that had grown between them in the shadow of danger. Elias stood unmoving. A wall, a promise made flesh. Eliza remained just behind him, close enough to feel the steadiness of his presence, close enough to know she wasn't alone anymore. But outside, the world was closing in. A flicker of orange light appeared beyond the broken doorway, then another. Eliza's breath caught. "No!" Flames, small at first, but growing. "They're going to burn it," she whispered, panic rising. Elias's eyes darkened. He had expected violence, but not this, not fire. Fire didn't just destroy, it erased. "You stay behind me," he said firmly, but Eliza grabbed his arm. "No," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "We don't hide from this." He turned to her, surprised. The fear was still there in her eyes, but it wasn't controlling her anymore. "They took everything from me once," she continued. "I won't let them take this too." This, not the cabin, not the mountains, him. Outside, the leader stepped into view through the smoke. His silhouette was framed by firelight, his presence calm, almost amused. "You always were stubborn," he called out to Eliza. Her body stiffened. Elias noticed. "You know him," he said quietly. Her voice barely came out. "His name is Carter." The name hung in the air like something poisoned. Carter smiled, as if hearing his name spoken gave him power. "You should have stayed where you belonged," he said. "Would have been easier for everyone." Eliza stepped forward. not hiding, not anymore. I don't belong to you. His smile faded slightly. Elias moved beside her now, not in front, beside, a silent acknowledgement. She wasn't just someone to protect. She was someone who had chosen to stand. Carter's gaze shifted between them. Then something colder settled in his eyes. You think this man can save you? He asked. Eliza didn't hesitate. Yes. The answer hit harder than any bullet. Even Elias felt it. For a brief moment, Carter's expression cracked, not with doubt, but with anger, real anger. Then let's see how long he lasts. Gunfire erupted again, louder, closer, more desperate. The flames outside spread faster now, licking at the edges of the cabin walls. Smoke began to creep inside, thick and choking. Elias fired back with precision, forcing the remaining men to keep their distance. But they weren't retreating. They were waiting for the fire to do what they couldn't. We can't stay here, Eliza said, coughing slightly. Elias knew it. The cabin wouldn't hold much longer. Back door, he said quickly. Stay low. They moved together, the heat building behind them as the fire began to consume the front of the cabin. Wood cracked, the roof groaned, time was running out. They stepped out into the cold night air and straight into danger. Carter was waiting, gun raised, a slow, satisfied smile on his face. I was hoping you'd run. Everything went still, too still. Elias moved instantly, stepping in front of Eliza. But the shot came too fast. A sharp crack split the air. Eliza gasped. Elias staggered slightly, then steadied himself. But the damage was done. A dark stain began to spread across his side. Elias! Her voice broke. He didn't fall, didn't even step back. But the pain, it was there. Carter chuckled darkly. Not so unbreakable after all. Eliza's fear surged, but something else rose with it, something stronger. No, she whispered, then louder. No! Before Carter could react, she moved, grabbing the fallen rifle near the cabin steps. Her hands trembled, but her eyes didn't. For the first time, they were steady. You don't get to take anything else from me, she said. Carter's smile faltered, just slightly. Elias looked at her, through the pain, through the firelight, and in that moment, he didn't see someone broken. He saw someone reborn. Carter raised his gun again, but this time, he wasn't the fastest. Eliza fired. The sound echoed through the mountains. Carter's body jerked, then fell. Silence followed, heavy, final. The fire crackled behind them. The danger was over. Eliza dropped the rifle, rushing to Elias as his strength began to fade. No, 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 she whispered, catching him before he fell. His weight was heavy now, too heavy. You're not leaving me, she said, her voice shaking. You promised. His breathing was uneven, but his eyes found hers, soft, steady. I told you, he murmured weakly. They wouldn't touch you. Tears streamed down her face. That's not enough, she cried. You have to stay. He tried to smile. I'm still here. She held him tighter, as if she could keep him anchored to this world through sheer will alone. You can't break your promise, she whispered desperately. His gaze didn't waver. I won't. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in the world, but in them. A promise. No longer just words, but something deeper, something neither fire nor violence could destroy. The flames behind them burned brighter, but ahead, the mountains stood still, endless, unbroken. The fire behind them roared like the end of something that had already taken too much, but in Eliza's arms, something refused to end. Stay with me, she whispered, her voice trembling as she held Elias against her. Please. Stay with me. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Each breath felt like a battle, but his eyes, they never left hers. I told you, He murmured faintly, his voice barely more than a breath. I wouldn't leave. Her tears fell freely now, landing against his skin, mixing with ash and smoke. You don't get to say that like it's easy, she cried softly. You don't get to make promises you can't keep. A weak smile touched his lips. I keep my promises. The night stretched on around them, cold, silent, unforgiving, but Eliza didn't move, didn't let go. She pressed her hand against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding, her fingers shaking but determined. You're going to be okay, she whispered, over and over, as if saying it enough times could make it true. You hear me? You're going to be okay. By the time the first light of dawn touched the mountains, he was still breathing, weak but alive. The fire had died down behind them, leaving only smoke and blackened wood where the cabin once stood. Everything was gone. Everything. Except them. It took hours to get him to shelter. A small, abandoned hunting outpost tucked deeper into the mountains. Eliza had never done something like this before, never carried someone, never fought this hard just to keep someone alive. But she didn't stop, not once, because this time, she wasn't the one being saved. Days passed in a blur of exhaustion and quiet determination. She cleaned his wound, changed the bandages, fed him water when he was too weak to lift his head. She barely slept, barely ate, but she stayed, always, and slowly, painfully. He began to come back. The first time he opened his eyes fully, the world was quiet. Soft light filled the small wooden room, and she was there, curled up in a chair beside him, asleep, her head resting near his arm, still holding on, even in sleep. He watched her for a long moment. Something deep in his chest shifted. Not pain, not guilt, something warmer, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Eliza, her eyes opened instantly. Fear flashed across her face, until she saw him awake, alive. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time, they were different. You're here, she whispered. He nodded slightly. I told you. She let out a broken laugh, half sob, half relief. You scared me, she said softly. I know. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, safe. You saved me, he said after a moment. She shook her head quickly. No, you saved me first. He looked at her, really looked, and something unspoken passed between them, something neither of them could deny anymore. I meant what I said, he continued quietly. They won't ever touch you again. Her gaze softened. I know. A pause, then, and you're not alone anymore either. The words were simple, but they carried everything. Weeks passed. The mountains slowly healed around them, and so did they. They built again, not just shelter, but something more, something stronger. Elias taught her how to track through the forest, how to read the sky, how to move through the mountains like she belonged there. And Eliza. She brought life back into the silence. Laughter, soft at first, then real, then free. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in gold and fire, they stood together on the ridge overlooking the valley. The wind moved gently now, not harsh, not cold, just present. I used to think my life ended that day, Eliza said quietly. Elias didn't interrupt. I thought everything I could be, was gone. She looked at him then. But I was wrong. A soft smile touched her lips. It was just waiting to begin again. Elias nodded slowly. I thought I lost everything once too. His voice was quieter now, less heavy. But maybe. He paused, glancing at her. I just hadn't found what was meant to stay. Their eyes met, and this time, neither of them looked away. You asked me something the day you found me, she said softly. He tilted his head slightly. I did. Her voice dropped just above a whisper. You asked who did that to me. A small pause, then, but you never asked who I became after. Something shifted in his expression. What did you become? He asked gently. She stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath, close enough to choose. Someone who doesn't run anymore. A heartbeat passed. And someone who stays. The space between them disappeared, not rushed, not forced, but inevitable. When he kissed her, it wasn't about saving or surviving, it was about choosing each other. The mountains stood silent around them, witnesses to something rare, something real, and for the first time in a long time, Elias didn't feel like a man running from the past, and Eliza didn't feel like someone defined by it. They stood there together as the last light of day faded into night, not broken, not lost, but whole, because sometimes the most powerful promises aren't the ones spoken in strength, but the ones kept, when everything tries to break them, and he had kept his. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes healing begins the moment someone chooses to stay,